Hey listeners, Nat here. Welcome back to Cheers with Nat, the podcast dedicated to cheering on women in drinks. Today's guest is Erika Haigh, founder of Mai Sake. Erika talks us through her career to date, including how her work in wine led her to discover her true passion for sake, and how she went from opening London's first dedicated sake bar to setting up a boutique fine sake merchant. A true sake educator, Erika tells us about her training, both within and outside of the classroom, helps us to bust some sake myths, and reflects on her role as a representative of Japanese culture more broadly. You'll also hear about her recent TV appearances, her love of travel, how she stays grounded outside of work, and lots more. It's time for a cheers and a chat with Erika Haigh. Here she is.
So today I brought a sake that's very top of mind for me because I featured it last Sunday on Channel 4 Sunday Brunch. I was featuring 3 sakes perfect to bring to a spring picnic. Nice. And today I looked out the window, it's sunny, so I thought this is a perfect sake to bring for Nat. It is a sake called Holic. So as the name suggests, hopefully you find it very delicious, very addicting. But it is a sake made by Eikun Brewery in Shizuoka Prefecture. So that's kind of, most people might know it for Mount Fuji. Okay. It's very accessible from Tokyo. Beautiful place with very good matcha, very good shrimp, really nice onsen, traditional ryokans you could stay at, but also this brewery called Eikun Brewery. And this sake in particular, it's very fresh, it's very fruity. Again, that's why it's so perfect for these warmer months. Something you want to pop open on a picnic, barbecue, whatever it is you're celebrating. Something that is cool about this sake is has this aroma compound called 4-MMP in it, which is usually found in white wines like Sauvignon Blanc and not in sake. So you might notice that this sake has more kind of citrus acidity compared to other sakes. So it could be a great kind of transition sake for people who are not used to sake but usually drink wine. This could be the perfect place to start.
I love that phrase, transition sake.
Yes.
I would always say like gateway. Like
gateway, yes.
Gateway beer
yes.
or a gateway wine. So we have a gateway sake today.
There we go.
Wow, you've sold that well. Okay, I'm really excited to try this.
Perfect.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I feel the descriptor I always say for sake, not all, but many, is melon.
100%.
Lots of
so there's
really
2 camps.
ripe,
Either you're gonna
aromas.
get like very juicy ripe melons or like apples, and then there's another side that's more banana-y.
Okay.
But it does tend to, just because of the aroma compounds, it tends to fall in 1 or 2 camps.
Oh, that's beautiful. Very mouth-watering, very juicy, fruity, floral, still that melon vibe coming through.
100%. Very smooth. Melon, exactly to your point, but again, the finish is quite refreshing, I think, so it kind of invites you to have another sip. But of course it's sake, so you have that nice like sweetness, mellow quality of kind of that rice flavor coming through. It adds that depth of flavor, so maybe you're having some crisps or whatever it is at your spring picnic, it won't clash with the sake. It really goes well as a food pairing as well.
There's a nice little warming sensation too, like a very gentle warming
Yes.
that I'm enjoying as well. Like you can feel, it's a bit stronger than my normal beverage, which is beer.
Okay,
still,
yes.
but still doable for your daytime picnic.
Yeah, and hopefully you agree that if people are more used to drinking white wines, that this could again be that gateway
Yeah,
sake.
with those similar characteristics. Oh,
Yeah,
lovely. Okay,
yeah.
I look forward to enjoying more of this.
Yes.
So clearly you know a little something about sake.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about your current role in the world of drinks and what a day-to-day might look like for you.
Great. So I am the founder of Mai Sake, which is a boutique Japanese fine sake merchant here in the UK. So I build direct relationships with sake producers in obviously Japan, bring these delicious drinks over here to the UK, and my job is to try to get as many people to love these drinks as much as I do. So we do wholesale distribution to many restaurants and bars, primarily in London, but we're really trying to spread the love throughout the UK as well. Nice. And we do many events so that we're, trying to reach as many people in the general public as possible as well. We have an online shop. So my day-to-day as an owner of a very, very small business, I wear many, many hats. But primarily, I do think it really revolves around human relationships. I think it's about cultivating and nurturing relationships I have, whether, again, it's with those producers in Japan, or it's with the beverage buyers or sommeliers in the restaurants that I partner with, or, it's my team or whoever it is. I do think a lot of it is relationship building is really what I do. But, another day I could be helping out my driver deliver sakes to a client last minute to, my focus this week was we're doing our next batch of deliveries from Japan. So with importing our next batch of sake, so that's a lot of logistics, warehousing, to, just enjoying sake, drinking sake with a client and doing a tasting, building a sake menu for our client. So all over the place, but always revolving around sake and people.
I love that. So let's talk about how you got to where you are now by going all the way back. When you were little, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up? And do you see any parallels between that and what you do now?
I wanted to be a nurse for the longest time.
Wow.
And then when I grew older, around, closer to university, I wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay.
Both of those things were very much about my desire to help others. I think I've, again, always focused on people. And I think in terms of a parallel to what I do now, it is about, again, nurturing those human relationships. And of course, I'm not saving lives, but I do think I am helping to spread the word about this craft beverage that is actually a dying craft in Japan. So we do need more people to be discovering sake and drinking it. So I do think I am, hopefully in my little way, helping the producers in Japan. And also when I share sake with people here in London, whether it's brightening up their day perhaps, or maybe even their week, I do think the world of food and beverage is about brightening people's day to day. So I think that's what brings me quite a lot of joy as well.
Yeah, that's quite a nice through line, right? You're saying the roles would have been very different, but the underlying message you're trying to get across is the same. Now, you didn't start in sake, so talk to us about your career and how you then found this passion.
I was first working in a fundraising company, actually specifically about kids' cancer care. Wow. So again, something very, very different.
The nursing link there, perhaps.
Yes,
that idea
exactly.
Of caring for people when they're unwell. Yeah.
That's it. So doing that, but my passion was first with wine, and then eventually I fell into sake, and it just made even more sense for me to go down the sake route. But originally, just the world of wining and dining, going out to restaurants, but even, during the evenings after coming back from work, just studying about wine. I was quite geeky about it. I do love to study. And the more you, I think, study about something, the more enjoyment you find from it. So, the world of drinks was first a passion, but I had a few things happened that led me to realize that you only live one life. Why not make your passion into a job? I'm sure many people would say that's not very much a good idea. There's two sides of it. But at that point in my life, I thought, why not just make something I love into something I dedicate myself to day to day? So I started off in the world of wine, but again, quickly transitioned to sake when I really felt that I could make an impact with my background being half Japanese, half Canadian. I speak Japanese, obviously I speak English, and I just think I'm a great bridge between Japanese culture and these English-speaking countries that I thought I could make more of an impact with sake than with wine.
Yeah, and I was actually listening to another interview with you, and what I thought was really interesting was your decision, being in the Western world as opposed to being back in Japan, to use wine, which many folks here are more familiar with, as the language to get people more comfortable with sake. So talk to me a bit about what you did in the world of wine and how those learnings then informed your transition into the sake world.
With wine, it was quite a brief stint, but mostly I worked on the floor as a sommelier, so that would very much involve people ordering wine and making recommendations, perhaps thinking about specific words to use that would very much appeal to your customer, your guest, whoever it is you're chatting to. I also had a few months working at a retail shop for wine. So that, of course, again, is all about making recommendations in a way that's specific to who you're talking to. So you shouldn't make, I think, blanket recommendations for anyone. It should very much be tailored to whoever it is you're speaking to, understanding what they want, and then again speaking in a way that, if they're a wine professional, you would chat to them a lot different than if they are very, very, very new to wine. So I do think in the same way, that's exactly what I do for sake, but I do like to use, flavor notes that would be more familiar for people in wine. So again, whether that be melon or grape or these kinds of citrus notes, very much focusing on the flavor profile. I do always try to serve sake in wine glasses, so that, again, wine glasses are the best vessel to appreciate aroma and flavor. But I do think it also, breaks down another barrier into entry for sake, which usually people think you need to have a sake cup that they don't have at home. There's all these different things that feel quite foreign about sake. But let's just, start with what people are familiar with. Pour it into a wine glass. Let's use these words that we use for wine. Of course, there's a bit more differences with sake, like umami, and you have more lactic notes perhaps, or, there's all these different things, but you don't need to describe it with very specific sake terminology. If you get into the world of sake, you could say things like jumai daiginjo, there's all these different categories, but it's gibberish even to Japanese people, let alone we shouldn't have that be the focus, especially for people new to sake. So I like to lead with, again, flavor profile, but also, stories about the producer, perhaps. Where are we in Japan? All these things play a part in how we perceive the liquid inside the bottle. So I think those are the things I like to focus on.
Yeah, you're kind of saying, forget about the formalities, forget about the way you think you have to experience sake. Let me just get it in a glass for you, a wine glass that you already have at home, and let me talk to you about it in terms that are going to be familiar, then weave in some new information that may be more sake specific that could open people's mind to the differences. Now, you took a bit of your experience, so being on the floor, being in retail, when you opened a sake bar. So you were the co-founder of Moto, which is a sake bar in Covent Garden. What led you to say, okay, I've learned a bit about wine, sake is my thing, I'm going to open a bar in London? That's not an easy thing to do. How did that come about?
I do have to admit that I was very naive, and I did not at all, you mentioned hard. Yes, it is hard. I did not really focus on that part, or didn't even know how hard it was going to be when I really, went headfirst into opening up the sake bar. My motivation was truly, I saw a white space in the market here. Honestly, I do think I was even a few years too early, actually. But at least I think I was at the, kind of the front guard of this movement of people becoming more interested in Japan just as a destination, let alone, now there's a Japanese restaurant opening by the day, right? And sake has slowly but surely kind of followed, and now more and more people know about sake. But although I do think I was even a tad bit too early, at least I was within a time period in which it was becoming more topical. But at that time, so this is end of 2019 when we opened, you really could not find a place like a wine bar or a pub for a pint of beer that you could go to very casually to enjoy sake. I really did think that, of course, there has been sake in the UK for, a decade, 2 decades, but it was purely in Japanese restaurants or somewhere very premium, perhaps, so there wasn't this casual offering that people could just rock up to and just have a glass of sake. So that is truly what I really wanted to open. And ultimately, sake is a beverage. So we need a place where people could go and physically taste and enjoy. And I wanted a very welcoming environment and the staff there to be very much knowledgeable. So again, we're not trying to force feed information to you, but if you are interested, then our team would be very happy to help. So yeah, it was purely a selfish desire for an offering like this that I did not see in the UK quite yet.
I visited with my parents.
Oh,
so
no way!
We stumbled in
Thank
randomly.
you so much. Oh, stop it! Really?
Yeah.
You were just in the area?
Yeah.
Okay.
My
wow.
parents were staying in Charing Cross Road.
Okay, perfect.
And my dad used to go to Japan a lot for work.
Oh, wow.
So he saw the sake bar and was like, oh, let's go in there.
Oh, fantastic.
We did the flight.
Oh, good.
We had a few little snacks.
Yeah.
But I think it was, to your point, that perfect opportunity to not feel like I have to go to a Japanese restaurant, I have to order it with a meal, I have to get it hot or drink it out of a tiny cup or, just pick at random from a menu. I love doing flights anyway because I like trying different things and comparing and contrasting. So having that as an option, being focused on the beverage, and then being able to chat with the people and say, oh, we like this one best. Where do we go next? It really made sake feel a lot more accessible to me. How do you train your team? For you, it's very much focused on that kind of wine introduction and making that bridge for people. Do you have your team trained in the same way, or how do you get them prepared to have the conversations with your customers?
I do give my team kind of bullet points to begin with, and usually it's always about where in Japan are we. I do think, the term terroir is not as used in sake as it is in wine, because it's more about what the producers do, what the brewer does during the brewing process that determines the flavor profile of the sake, as opposed to where in Japan. But I do think it's part of the narrative when explaining a sake. So where in Japan are we?
Kind of grounding us.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Very much who the producer is, what makes them special. And then when talking about the sake, there's usually one or two things that makes that sake special. Perhaps it's a very particular way of brewing. Or, this sake that I introduced today, something very unique about it, this aroma compound you would never find in other sakes, but only in white wines. There's always something to pick out that could be very memorable for not just that staff member introducing the sake, but also for the guest, who they might not remember the Japanese name of the sake because it's quite complicated, but they might remember that one tidbit of information that if they like the sake, they could come back and ask for it, given that piece of information that was very memorable. So something very unique about the sake. And then I do like to give 3 tasting notes. 3 because, keeping it easy and simple, again, for my team to remember. But that, I always tell them, is my tasting note. So after tasting it for a few weeks, after chatting about it with guests for a few weeks, I want them to develop their own vocabulary in describing the sake. But at the beginning, I always give them 3 tasting notes. And I say, you start off with this, and you add on afterwards, because I do think it is the most convincing when people come up with their own interpretation of that drink. But again, I don't expect everyone to think of things off the bat. And again, not every one of my team members is trying to become a sommelier. Maybe it's a brief chapter of their lives before they do something completely different. So I don't expect that from everyone. So again, we start off all with the same foundation, but anyone who wants to add on, I really welcome that.
Yeah. We'll come back to your education journey and how you became a sake sommelier and what that takes and how it differs from a wine sommelier. Stepping away from sake for a moment, you mentioned the naivety of going into business, kind of opening a bar in London. What does it take? What new skills did you have to pick up? What crazy experiences did you have in the process of opening a brick and mortar space in central London?
I mean, every single thing you could possibly think of and you can't even think of probably has landed on my things to do. I do think the most difficult part actually is training your team. I do think that ultimately that is the most difficult. But, everything from the construction of the space, that was one delay after another, and it was so delayed that I was even on the day of our soft launch, I was putting in the pillows of our couch moments before our first guests arrived. So it was, delayed to that extent, to, everything from people on the street or in Charing Cross, so it's not the most, sometimes it could be a little bit of a rough environment, so dealing with, things of that nature, not even guests and customers, but
what's happening outside
my business to, we had the best timing in the world. We opened 3 months before the pandemic. So we had to close. We just opened. This is when, everything we've been working towards, we're just starting to get momentum, and then we had to close. So, I do think there were so many barriers and challenges, but I think every single business owner, regardless of whether in hospitality or not, will tell you that every single day is filled with challenges, but it's truly about how you tackle those challenges and just knowing that everything you can figure out, or at least having that confidence.
Telling yourself that.
Yes, exactly. So that's what's key.
Yeah, in addition to that, are there any other sort of big learnings or personal takeaways you have taken away from your experience of owning the business?
I think the beauty of hospitality, actually, as much as, first and foremost, actually the hardship as well. As a guest, if you've never worked in hospitality, you just go and kind of romanticize the whole environment, I think. You go maybe for date night with your friends, whatever it is the occasion is, you order, things come, it's a new experience, and then you leave that experience there and go back to your everyday. But to make those fleeting moments a reality, what goes on behind the scenes for the people who work there, whether, regardless of whether you're an owner or simply the bartender or the sommelier or the chef or whoever it is, there's so much involved with making that a reality. So that means hardship, but also there's such a camaraderie to the behind the scenes, I think, in hospitality. The friendships you have with your colleagues within your own bar, restaurant, but also, different sommeliers, bartenders that you meet that become your friends in, the neighborhood restaurant, or we all are kind of bonded by these challenges, I think. And it's just such a strong bond, which makes you kind of fall in love with the hospitality industry even more. So I do think that element is something that I've really taken away, and that I think is what keeps people going in this industry.
Definitely. So talk to me about your sake education journey. What is a sake sommelier? How does one become one? And how does it differ from what people are more familiar with, likely, which is a wine sommelier?
I think that there's actually a lot of similarities with becoming a wine sommelier. Of course, you could go down the route of taking different certifications. Of course, things like WSET, there's level 1, 2, and 3 for sake as well, just like wine or spirits or beer. There's also things like the SSI, like International Kikisakeshi Sommelier, so that's where you get your sommelier certification.
Okay.
There's a number of different things like that, perhaps similar to Master of Wine or all these different, wine sommelier kind of certifications as well. You can get a little badge that you feel proud of, but ultimately involves hours and hours of crying and studying and, blind tastings and all that. But for me, I do think the best learning has been through going to different breweries in Japan. I think that's where you learn the most. And also tasting a lot, of course, adds to your experience. But also different things I've done. For example, I judge every year at the International Wine Challenge in the sake arm of the competition. And that's where it brings sake experts from all around the world to blind taste hundreds and hundreds of different sakes that then becomes, put into a gold medal, silver medal, so on and so forth. So being able to taste with different experts, I think that's really informative as well. So I think the certifications are really important in terms of your resume and maybe as a starting off point. But I think even with wine, where you learn the most is truly visiting producers, drinking a lot, and just being surrounded by other experts that kind of add to your knowledge.
That's a really interesting point, because I think about this in the world of beer too. It's moving from the theoretical knowledge, which you can get just from reading the books, to then actually the practical knowledge, which in beer as well, we've got a lot on the service side that, you wouldn't know unless you're able to go into a cellar and look behind the bar and see how the beer gets from the keg to the glass or the cask to the glass. we also have the idea, like you said, of meeting the producers and understanding what their setup looks like and how they do it differently, or if there is an impact of the local area, what the cuisine is, what the flavors are, what the history is there. So for you, it's marrying both, and then that informs how you're able to bring it to life for people.
100%, yeah.
And did that then lead you doing these visits to your next project, which is Mai Sake? What made you move from running the bar to then saying, actually, there's a lot more products I want to get out to people? Was it because of your visits, or what led to that next step?
I felt as if, as great as it is that people get to come to Moto and experience these sakes, there still wasn't that connection to people's day-to-day lifestyle. So this was a sake bar. It was one place that maybe people come once every few months. We were very blessed with regulars, but we didn't have people coming every day, of course, very understandably. And not that I'm saying you should be drinking sake every day, but more in terms of your everyday lifestyle and just having sake be something more top of mind, something that is a beverage category you think of, just like, oh, should we have wine? Should we have beer? Should we have cocktails? Should we have sake? And I think for that to become a reality, sake needs to be in a lot more places. So because I have the privilege of having these direct relations with these producers in Japan that I think just make incredible products, I did want to share that again with more people, and not just from one location, but in a variety of different restaurants. So primarily my clients are not Japanese restaurants. They're every other cuisine, whether that be modern British or French or, you name it, to, again, having these different events where we do things like sake and pizza, sake and cheese. We've done so many different things. All of this to kind of not normalize sake, but yeah, maybe so. Like just have it be something that feels closer to people. And with that desire is where I really transitioned to focusing on Mai Sake. Mai means every day, actually. So something hopefully you can enjoy on the everyday. And again, whether that be just browsing through our shop or going to the different restaurants and bars that we supply to, hopefully there's more chances that you're discovering these beautiful, delicious drinks.
Wow, yeah, I was going to ask you to explain what Mai meant, because I did read that on the website and I thought that is so fitting, right? That is the whole idea. And I can understand the journey now, speaking to you, from that initial dream of saying, well, I'm in service and I want to serve sake to more people. A sake bar is the perfect fit. To then you do it and you realize, actually, it's not enough. It's limited. It's to the people that are coming there. How do you then reach that broader audience? Now, I also hear this coming through the conversation with you. On your LinkedIn, you describe yourself as, quote, first and foremost, a sake educator. Why is that how you like to describe yourself?
I think it all starts with education, especially for sake, where not a lot of people know enough about sake. And I think it's just basic human nature that you don't really want to approach something you don't really know much about. You don't want to seem foolish, or, you just want to be a little bit more informed before you do anything, let alone purchase something. And especially in the UK, when there's so many other drinks available, why would you seek out sake? So with that, I think education comes first and foremost. Just, how, of course, delicious these drinks are, but also how varied the world of sake is. Whether you like sparkling wine, then go for a sparkling sake. Whether you like, maybe in the world of beer, something like a stout or a porter, maybe you like these kind of very rich, bold styles, then there's these kind of rich, savory styles of sake that might be more to your liking. So simply the fact that there's more variety, there's so many things you could learn about sake that will, I think, be more inviting to more people.
Do you have a go-to recommendation for someone who is brand new to sake to say where to start? Is it the same for everybody, or do you need that bit of knowledge about what their preferences are?
It definitely helps if I do have people's personal preference in terms of what they usually drink, because it's so subjective what we find delicious, depending on the person. But if I don't know anything and I am kind of, let's say it's an event for 50 people, there's going to be varying subjective opinions there as to what people think is delicious or not delicious. So in that case, I do love to do, kind of, you mentioned when you came to Moto, you had a flight. flight.
Yep.
So I do love a flight of sake that's very different. So
Yeah.
I would always pick something that's very fruity, fresh, approachable, than something that's a little bit more dry with minerality, perhaps, and more cereal driven, to ending with maybe something that's quite savory and rich and more like a red wine type of experience that maybe you want to pair with your main dish in a meal. So I think that there should be something that someone will end up preferring more than the others, and that's kind of what I like to do for people's first time.
Yeah, and you don't want them to only try one and think, well, this is what all sake must be like. So you want to give them the options to show how varied it can be. Now, on that theme, I'm thinking actually there could be some listeners who don't really know much about sake. If you were to give us a little mini lesson in what sake is, very, very simple, how it's made, then we'll do some sake myth busting so we can change people's perceptions perhaps. Tell us a bit about what it is, how it's made, and if there are some things that people have gotten wrong about it over the years that you'd like to correct.
Sake is Japan's national drink. It's been made in some way, shape, or form for the last 2,000 years, so very long history. There's around 1,200 sake breweries or so in Japan. These breweries are very much family-run businesses. Skills are passed down from generation to generation. So lots of the producers I work with are 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th generation. So lots of history and culture there. This is a delicious drink that we already mentioned, has so much variety. So whatever it is that's usually your preference for beverages, you probably can find something equivalent in sake. It is a fermented drink, so very much like wine or beer, so it's not a spirit. Thinking of kind of sake myths that you mentioned,
Yeah.
I do think a lot of people still think that sake is a spirit, perhaps because traditionally in Japan you serve it in these little cups, and maybe that for anyone outside of Japan thinks it's more like a shot glass.
Okay.
Yeah, so perhaps that's where the misconception comes from. Sure, it's a little bit higher in alcohol compared to wine or beer, so the average percentage is around 15% ABV, but that is only a touch higher than, let's say, a bold like Shiraz, let's say like 13.5% or so.
Yep.
So it's not too much higher than wine. So I do always say enjoy it like you would a fine wine, but in terms of how it's made, it's brewed more closer to a beer because you're working with the main ingredient being rice, and rice doesn't have readily accessible sugars like you would find in the wine world, which is grapes, obviously. So the way you kind of access those sugars for the yeast to get at to make alcohol is closer to the brewing of beer. But I do think in terms of enjoyment, I would say it's a little bit closer to a wine drinking experience.
I like how you've explained it that way because it may bring in drinkers from different perspectives. People who think, well, is it just for food? No, it does have this wine-like drinking experience, this beer-like brewing experience, almost a spirits-like serving experience, but it is not any of them. It could, whatever angle gets you in, you're welcome. And there are different ways, different things to learn about it. You do a lot of events in your work. Tell me a bit about why you find events so important, and perhaps any very memorable experiences that you have done, conversations that you've had, or events that you've put on.
Sake ultimately is an alcoholic drink, so I think hearing me blabber on about it online or on Instagram or anywhere you find me talking about sake is not enough. Ultimately, I want people to taste it. So I think events are the best way to do that.
Okay.
And again, I like different themes that kind of make sake seem more accessible. So instead of me maybe rocking up in a kimono and serving sake to you, sure, that might be, a great occasion. Yes.
Yeah.
But, we've done, like I already mentioned, different food pairing options. We've done very, very, let's say, fancy things. Like we did a sake launch at Claridge's Hotel. So that was a very fancy affair, to something, late last year, speaking of the pizza pairing, we did it with Circus Pizza, which is a very, very, very delicious pizza shop, I guess, in St. John's Wood. So that was very informal. Everyone just family style enjoying pizza while we pair with different sakes and chat about the producers. And Kit from Circus Pizza chatted about his pizza. So again, that's very informal. I've also been at places like Wilderness Festival. I partnered up with Carousel and did like a sake kind of travel through Japan through sake type of experience. So we've done so many different things. I do think the biggest joy is hearing people say, wow, I didn't know sake could taste like this, or wow, this is not at all what I expected from sake, whether that be, again, the storytelling that you get to do during events, to even, I think, bringing people together, like-minded people. Anyone who wants to go to an event with sake involved tends to bring in actually quite a great crowd. I've always been so grateful with our guests at these different events, and people end up becoming friends. So I think I love the community aspect of events, but also, again, ultimately, it's the best way to drink, enjoy, hear, and chat about sake.
Yeah, and it sounds very creative to me. You're thinking, where can I or how can I get sake into places where it isn't normally? Are a lot of these ideas coming from you? Are they coming from the organizers, or a bit of a combination?
It's definitely a combination. At the beginning, again, I mentioned in my early days of working with sake here in London, nobody cared. Nobody needed to drink sake. They were drinking everything else. So then I had to create those opportunities. But now, luckily, there's more of an interest. So I also get requests or, different opportunities. So now, thankfully, it's more of a back and forth, but 100% at the beginning, it was me trying to pitch different ideas to different people.
Well, that has to feel good then, right? It sounds like you're making a bit of an impact if people are coming to you with ideas and wanting sake at their events that maybe they hadn't considered a few years ago.
What a relief, finally. It's great when your hard work pays off, but again, of course, I cannot personally take the credit. It's a combination of many players in the sake industry working diligently to push this category forward. But I hopefully have played a little bit of a piece in that. So it's wonderful that now more people are interested in the category.
Yeah. And then the other part that you play, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, is that you get to talk sake on Sunday brunch, which is pretty impressive. So how did that come about? And how do you think about preparing for what you show to that audience?
So I think my first appearance was almost exactly a year ago, spring of 2025, and it was supposed to be a one-off thing. So I went and I thought of a theme. I think that we very much did cherry blossoms in Japan. So we decorated my kind of station with beautiful cherry blossoms, and I introduced 3 sakes that's perfect for springtime. And then I guess, there was a great reception from the viewers. So now I'm invited back every 2 to 3 months or so. And I always think about a different theme. So again, it was spring picnic last Sunday. January, I did 3 sparkling sakes.
Oh, fun.
Including one from Cambridge, actually. So we actually have 3 different sake breweries right here in the UK. And one of them is Sparkling Sake Brewery in Cambridge. So really wanted to feature them. But we've done a hot sake segment once. So every time I like to think of a different theme and then have 3 different sakes to represent that theme.
That sounds so fun. And of course, I hope it's a nice way to then promote people to come find the sakes from you as well afterwards. Is that right?
Yes. So I like to feature a sake from our portfolio from Mai Sake. But the other 2, I really like to feature from different distributors, different, sake producers. Again, I don't think competition at all will lead to this beverage category moving forward. I think we should all collaborate, and we're still too tiny of an industry, I think, to be quarreling amongst each other. So I think it's always great to showcase sake just in its entirety, and sometimes different producers and different distributors have things that I'm looking for. So it's great to be able to kind of collaborate with different companies and colleagues as well.
Yeah, it comes back to the idea of community as well,
Yeah.
that you were talking about, that we are all in this together, we're all working together. This community is not just in the UK though. Tell me a bit about some of your travels. Where has sake taken you to?
To places I didn't expect, like Malta, for example.
Oh, wow.
I had a client in Malta, so went there a few times to help with the sake program there. But sake truly is expanding globally. And actually, the UK isn't even the leader when it comes to importing sake. I think places like the United States is kind of leagues beyond the UK in terms of sake consumption. And they even have their own sake breweries. There's quite a lot. I think 20 to 30 or so sake breweries literally within the United States.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but there's sake being enjoyed in Canada, South America, all across Europe now. There was just a national, or what was it? It was something about a sake week or something in Poland a few weeks ago.
Wow.
So it's really exciting to see. Of course, in Asia, places like Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan has imported sake for quite some time now, and their appreciation for sake is really rich and extensive. But now for across Europe and places around the world, it's really exciting to see. But I think we have a lot more we could be doing. Again, things like not just at Japanese restaurants, but at local restaurants, and maybe even more in supermarkets where people actually buy their day-to-day drinks. I think there's so much more we could be doing. So lots more work ahead.
You like work, it sounds like. On that then, as you do keep very busy with the work that you're doing, what is it that you do outside of work, perhaps, to keep you grounded?
I love running. That's been my constant hobby, I would say, maybe since like high school.
Okay.
But I find it very meditative. I know it's not for everyone, but I do love just whatever I'm going through, wherever I am in the world. You just need a pair of running shoes.
Yeah.
And if you're traveling, it's a great way to explore the city as well. You see, you cover more ground when you're running, obviously. And I love always having milestones that's not related to work. So
Yeah.
I'm always signed up to a different marathon or a half marathon, and just having those be different goalposts, again, completely outside of work, I think is great to have.
I did see that you just completed a half marathon in Berlin and got a personal best. So
Yes.
congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Is that something that takes you to travel as well? Do you like to marry up your travel with your running, with your sake interest, so it all works together?
Always.
Yeah.
So love traveling after booking a running race.
Okay.
It also keeps me very responsible, let's say, because the days leading up to the race, I can't drink as
You can't
much.
overindulge. Okay.
Yes, and then I get to overindulge after the race because we're celebrating,
As
right?
your reward,
Yes.
yeah.
So it keeps me in check. But again, you see more of the city as well, and you just have this sense of accomplishment when you participate in a race, tick that off, and so it adds to the fun of traveling there as well.
Yeah, that's great. And on the travel piece, where have you lived since you were little? Just curious where that love of travel came from, and if it was from living in different places as a young person.
Until I was 18, I lived in Japan.
Yeah.
So born and raised there. But my family always liked to travel a lot. So, my mom always said that instead of spending money on, let's say, clothes or other things, she really emphasized travel as a way she wanted to spend money. So that was primarily in Southeast Asia and, places that are a lot more accessible from Japan. When I was 18, I moved to Canada. I moved to Montreal, did my university there. Then I moved to Toronto, and then I moved here to the UK. But I love, being here now. You get to travel in Europe a lot easier, but always there's a trip planned.
Yeah, lots of different continents to be based in to then
Yes.
get to explore. Do you see yourself at all representing Japanese culture to the UK more broadly, or you really want to hone in on that sake experience?
I always try to talk about an element of Japanese culture when I'm talking about the sake. So again, maybe it's the place. So, this sake we mentioned, there's Mount Fuji, the green tea, and this and this. If it's another sake, maybe there's a craft in the locality that maybe is a dying craft and they're really trying to revive that craft. Things like that. I think it's really great for me, who always travels to the different sake breweries, and I always know kind of what happens in that location, and being kind of that spokesperson to be able to share that with more people. It's always great for me to travel, and it's wonderful for me to be able to eat these things and go to this location, but if it stops with me, I feel like that would be quite a shame. So yes, I do like to chat about the sake, but I always involve an element of something about the culture or the history as well.
Yeah, right. You can bring to your listeners, your drinkers, your customers what they want. If they are new and they just want to learn about the beverage, great. But if they're curious, then you can say, oh, and also this is from this place, and this is what happens there, and this is my experience, and perhaps encourage them to travel and visit. Amazing. So many layers to this.
Yes.
I'm enjoying it.
We actually have a newsletter called My Traveler, And every month or 2 months, if you're subscribed, we give you Japan travel recommendations. So I think now, again, we mentioned that Japan is quite a hot spot for travel. But unfortunately, as beautiful as Japan is and the history and the culture is so rich, it's hard to access if you don't speak the language or if you're not Japanese. It's very similar to sake, actually. If you're Japanese, if you speak the language, if you're kind of in the community, then it's very accessible and you enjoy. But it's very hard to kind of penetrate this very small bubble, if you will. So I always love to give recommendations about where to travel in Japan. That's not just Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka. Again, it's great to go to these cities, and there are more restaurants and so on and so forth where there's English menus and there's this, and it makes it more accessible. But I do think the heart and soul of Japan is more the countryside, and it's places that actually not many tourists go to. So I think, doing things like the My Traveler and people reading from an actual inside source about where it's good to go to, I think those are also fun things I get to do that hopefully is helping people's perception of Japan.
I'll definitely link that in the show notes.
Great.
But again, it makes me think you're in this sort of translator role, which I'm enjoying, this idea of opening up a world and then ultimately coming full circle again, helping people, right? You want people to experience the things that you enjoy so much. How do they get access to it? Lovely. Okay, last question before our last call round. We talked about what got you into working into the drinks industry, and wine first, fell into sake, and now look at you. What is it that keeps you here?
All the delicious but happy moments I cherish through sake, in terms of course, drinking sake with friends, but also new connections I've made through this drink. It really bonds and ties people together. And even before I mentioned the world of hospitality, if you work in food and drink, I do think, again, that camaraderie, I do think all these things keeps me in this industry. Every time I go back to Japan, I'm actually going back in mid-May for a few weeks, but every time I go back, that also is another time where I think, this is why I do what I do, because, these producers are not, rolling in cash, they actually deserve to be a lot more profitable. It's quite very much a work of craftsmanship that I think deserves a lot more recognition. So it fuels my fire, if you will, to really help to promote the beverage category even more. So, there's really a number of different things that keeps me here.
Nice. All right, last call, quick questions, quick answers. Do you have a favorite beverage-related book, podcast, or program?
Sake on Air is fantastic if you're getting into sake, or even if you're in the world. It's a great way to stay on top of all things sake.
Ooh, good shout. What are you streaming or reading now?
I just started reading last night Hooked, which is the new book by the Japanese author that wrote Butter.
Oh, okay.
Which was everywhere
Yes.
a few months ago, perhaps, and now she has a new book. So
Okay.
I've just started reading. I can't tell you if it's good yet.
Not
but
too far into it
yeah,
yet.
so far so good.
Okay, cool. Dream drinks destination you want to visit?
Italy, simply because I've only been there when I was younger with my family, and it's about time I go to drink the vino and again eat and drink my way through Italy.
Tap back into that wine love initially.
Yes.
Nice. If you could only drink one beverage other than water for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I mean, I have to keep it on brand. Sake.
Some people don't. Some people
Really?
surprise me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, some people are like coffee. Gotta get that caffeine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. No, let's stick to sake.
Good. Maybe there's some caffeinated sake out there. somewhere.
Let's see.
Give you that buzz. And last question, is there another woman in drinks that you'd recommend I speak with for a future episode?
Sarah Stewart would be fantastic. She's a WSET educator as well for sake, but she also kind of straddles that kind of wine knowledge and sake knowledge. But she's also a cheese educator. She does a whole lot. I think she would be a fantastic person to chat to.
Nice. Oh, I'll have to come with drinks and snacks for that one.
Yes. She would be the one to talk to about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. You'll find more of Erika's recommendations on her Guest Best reel on my Instagram at cheers_with_nat, later this week. And that's a wrap on the first season of Cheers with Nat. Thanks so much for joining me. You may be wondering what this means for your weekly dose of awesome women in drinks, but you've got nothing to worry about. While I'm off recording new episodes for season 2, you're going to get to hear from some of the guests on my previous podcast, Beer with Nat, with an updated introduction from them to let you know what they've been up to since we recorded. Brand new episodes of Cheers with Nat will return in a few weeks, starting with the 4 incredible guests I chatted with on my recent trip to NYC. If you have any thoughts on the show that you'd like to share, I'm always happy to hear them. You can find me on Instagram, Substack, or via email on cheers@beerwithnat.com. And if you've got a friend or colleague you think might enjoy the show, please do help spread the word. Thanks, as always, for listening. Cheers!